All right.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Psychic Wives. I'm Ginger Hendry.
And I am Jerry Carabin. And today we were super excited, and you guys are going to be as well. We have a guest today. Our guest today is Dr. Danielle Clark, and she is a life spirituality teacher and coach. She's an intuitive empath. She's a business professor and writer focused on, and this is the big picture here, how transformation happens when we break judgment habits. So we are super excited that you're here, Dr. Clark. I'll call you Danielle from now on going in, if you don't mind. Because Ginger and I always say this, we're so super excited to have guests here for everyone, but for ourselves, you know what I mean? Like, we're here to put all this out there to help you guys, but we're like psyched, that we get stuff. So Ginger, tell us how you met Danielle.
I met Danielle through New Hampshire Metaphysical, and we've had some of the people on. Julianne Gaziella has been a guest, and Jen Hackett, who's worked with them as well, has been on. And what we wanted to talk with Danielle about today is a term that I mentioned to Danielle I only heard a year ago, and that is dark night of the soul. Since that time, it seems to be popping up. You know how that kind of happens. I hear it here and there. And then when I came across Danielle has a lot of background in Dark Night of the Soul. And so we're really excited to be able to talk with her about what that journey has been like, so that people understand, what that is and what's happening and how transformative, right, that it is for people.
In full disclosure, I had never heard the term until Ginger brought it up, and I was like, immediately thought, well, that sounds interesting. And then she had sent me all your information, Danielle, and I immediately went over to that information, and I was like, oh yes, please. Oh yes, please. We're going to let you talk. I swear. Go ahead.
So Danielle, welcome. If there's anything else that you want to do an intro on, please let us know.
Thank you. Goodness, I appreciate your energy and enthusiasm. I'm so excited to be chatting with you ladies, and thank you to your community for listening. I believe you found here and us for a reason. So
Absolutely.
Get your notebook out, get your pen out, and enjoy the ride.
I love it. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I can't stand it.
So tell us, Danielle, because you told me, because we had a conversation about really how this journey started for you in Dark Night of the Soul. So can you just fill our listeners in on the beginning of your journey and where it's taken you?
Sure. I think the term beginning is funny because it's so hard to give an exact, right? Because as you peel back layers, you realize, oh, that connected to that and that connected to that.
Yeah. So when did it all start?
Right.
Yeah.
However, I'll start the story from here. So I lost my job unexpectedly, and I didn't quite realize it until later on, but I had a lot of ego wrapped up into my profession and into my job. I lost my job unexpectedly, and almost instantly I fell into this unexplainable physical retreat type state where I needed to be isolated from the world. I could barely eat. I could barely drink. It was an intense depression. And what was interesting about it was there was this spiritual thirst that I had never experienced before. During one of my darkest moments, right after I lost my job, I'm in bed. I have no idea what's happening or why. And I just start seeking out spiritual audible books. I'm too dazed to even read, but I need to listen to mediums, and I needed to listen to spiritual healers, and that wasn't my go-to. I was a bit of a Scrooge, if you will. So everything that I would read had to do with how to be better, how to be the best leader you can be, how to be the best boss. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I never entertained anything else other than a work-focused book. And so I'm in bed for this period. I'll say this 48 to 72 hour period, which was definitely the hardest because I didn't know what was happening. And I got this thirst to journal, which was something else that I never did, just to pour out my feelings. Like
And let me interrupt.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt you for a second. So it was just one of those things, like what we get sometimes. Your intuitive is just a knowing, like, journal, right? It was like
Yes.
you're
I
called
had
to
to
it.
go with it.
Yeah.
You're spot on, Jerry. I couldn't explain it, but my body and my mind and my soul was telling me journal and speak out these spiritual resources. And I started doing that, and it wasn't making me feel better, but it was giving me some kind of companionship, if you will. And then I started getting really confused. I'm like, who the hell is this person? Like, why
Right.
am I in bed? I'm never in bed. Why am I seeking out journaling and spirituality? And so I remember I grabbed my phone, like in this fetal position, like Googling for answers, like frantically, like what is happening? And that is when I came across this term, a dark night of the soul. And what it is it's usually triggered by some sort of an event that shakes our ego, or shakes our sense of belonging, or shakes our understanding of the world as we know it. Many people will experience a dark night if they lose a partner, or maybe get out of a long relationship where they had a lot of identity. But for me, it was losing my job. It was there was so much ego and self-worth locked into that. So that's what sparked this incredible journey for me. And that's how I found out what a dark night was. And then I did more research, and the dark night term started finding its way to me, and I started reading, and I went on my dark night path.
That is so cool. So going back to like your job, like you were your job. You were your job. So that's why it was such a big deal when, it wasn't like you were, well, I don't want to say this because it wasn't, it wasn't like your job when you were 17 and you were, making French fries or something like that, that you were like, okay, whatever. That wasn't that wasn't your thing. This was your career. And so it was, I'm not making myself clear at all here.
No, you are. You
Yeah.
are.
Yeah,
Because
this was your career, and this is who you had become. Ginger, you and I have talked about this before,
Yes.
about we were both in the corporate world for forever, and it's almost like you become sucked into this thing, and it's all you are, because
Right.
you're there constantly, and you're working there constantly.
Well, and here's the other thing too, you're generally good at it, right? So you feel
Right.
good about yourself. So it is a whole ego thing. But to your point too, Danielle, when you said that, this was catalyst for you, but for somebody else, it might be the loss of a partner, a divorce, or something, because again, that's where your identity and safety and all of that is wrapped up. I'm curious, I know we'll probably talk about this at the end too, but what your spiritual or religious growing up background was. I mean, did you have a sense that there was something, more or divine power, or was that not even kind of in the context of where you were?
Good question. I was raised a forced Catholic, if you will.
Like everybody that's on this show was
I know,
raised
I know.
Catholic. I'm just saying.
And I never connected to it. I always felt awkward. When do I stand? Where do I sit? My butt hurts because of the wooden pew, right? I don't know what to sing. I don't know what it means. Because although we would go to church, it was never discussed or brought into my home life. So that really created a friction, if you will, between religion and me. It was my dad who divorced, and I went to go live with my mom. I was like, woohoo, no more church, right? And I don't know that I never didn't believe, but it's not like I was a believer either. I'd say my first knowing that there was something more, I was in my early 20s, and my mother-in-law, who is an absolute angel on earth, passed away. And I then had a clear knowing that something more existed. It wasn't a hope. It wasn't trying to make me feel better. It wasn't like, Danielle, like, she's okay. It was deeper than that. It was like, Danielle, she's okay, right?
Mhm.
Clear knowing. And then a few years later, my dad passed away, which just really opened up my spiritual spidey senses. And I could feel him, I could talk to him, signs and synchronicities. But even after that, depending on how I was doing in my life, I've shut down to spirit, or, I've said, oh no, that was just a coincidence.
Yep.
So my journey has definitely been a bit of a roller coaster, if you will. This dark night was the event that really opened up my spirituality and has kept those gates open. That beautiful reminder that there's this spiritual being inside of me, and that it's my calling to keep one foot grounded in this beautiful human world, if you will,
Right.
and one of my other feet, into home, which is the universe.
So the term, the dark night of the soul, is that period or that space that you found yourself in lying in bed for 48, 72 hours, whatever. That's the term, that's what it's. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit, just to make that clear to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody else
I
too.
think that's really, really important. So that was the start of the dark night. A dark night is going to be a different experience for everyone. Like we talked about, something different is going to trigger it for someone. And the length is going to be different for everyone. So where I felt it the most, that physical, that 48 to 78 hours, my dark night was about 6 to 7 months. So it really was this journey. What I discovered after losing my job and this stripping of ego was I had unhealed trauma from my childhood that I didn't even know existed or still existed, right? And it was this onion, layers that came up through the journaling, through the crying, through the, not working and being forced to spend some time with me. And I just, a period of having to look at myself and my life honestly, it was like the blinders just came off, and it was ugly. My marriage was in desperate need of a rekindling. Tons of friends and family members that I hadn't connected with because I was too busy. There was just so much. So everything kind of through signs, synchronicities, through intuition, just really reared its head up. And so I'd say that's the dark, and not just because it's doom and gloom, but because you don't know what's going to happen. So it's not just because it's scary. Throughout all of it, there was this sense of peace and connection to
and
spirit.
guidance, correct?
Yes,
Guidance.
correct.
So that's kind of what, like, okay, so you start journaling, you're like, I'm being guided to journal, I'm being pulled into that. So as you're journaling or as you're crying, you're writing stuff, and it's almost like, would you say that there was almost like a little bit of automatic writing happening in there?
Oh yes, absolutely.
So that's what you're being led to write about this stuff or whatever, bring this stuff up. So now there's the onion thing. It keeps coming up, and like, oh my God. So then you start realizing the trauma and the childhood stuff and wow.
Yeah.
So you were doing like personal work, like to the nth degree, by yourself, journaling, like, holy cow.
Right.
It was deep. It was
pretty impressive too, because as humans, it's pretty easier for us to say, nope, not going to look at that. Nope,
Right.
not going to look at that. So the fact that you stayed with it, like, holy, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, bravo, because I think that's hard to, as humans, not run away from that piece, right?
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's one of the things I'm most proud about as it relates to this journey. For the most part, with the exception of a few bloopers, I did not resort to escapism, and that's actually one of the things that I coach on now as it relates to working through trauma and dark night of the soul. Because I stayed in it, even if it was uncomfortable, even if I didn't know what was happening next. didn't over anything. I didn't, I mean, again, there was bloopers. I definitely wasn't perfect, if you will.
Yeah, you had
And
your
I,
down days.
yes, but I didn't resort to over anything. It's not like I was over watching TV to numb my mind. I wasn't, for the most part. There was a few slip ups, but I made it a point not to drink during that whole part, with the exception of a few slip ups when I wasn't feeling the best me, right?
Yeah.
And that ended up not too good, but beautiful learning lessons there. So yeah, that escapism, I didn't over anything. And I think that's really, really critical. And one of the reasons I was able to come out of my dark night with love and grace, and a comedic side to it, right? Like I think that's important too. Yes, this is heavy work, but we can't take anything too seriously,
Yeah, no.
right? Like
Yeah.
even the bloopers, like it happened. It's funny. We can see the light even in the dark, and I want to make sure we talk about that, because even though going through the loss of my job and realizing that the relationships around me weren't nearly as strong as they should be, even though there's so much dark, there was always light. There was always amazing things happening together. And then of course, wow, my whole world opened up after I put in the hard work and
my
went.
my feeling is that light, those pieces of light, or the path, like go in this direction, go in this direction.
Right.
I'm sitting here scribbling notes down, like questions, etc. First of all, again, I got to say this again. Amazing that you stayed with it and did not do the escapism, did not do like, let me drown myself in a bottle of wine or whatever, so that now you have this to offer to people going forward. Can you talk about how you, like, was there a part where you're like, okay, I'm, here I am going uphill, struggle. Was there a point where you're like, hey, I'm getting this and I'm on the other side of it? Or does it not really happen that way?
Yeah, that's good. I feel like there was a lot of those moments. So a few come to mind. Shortly after I lost my job and I started getting signs from the universe, which was just so cool. That was a bright light, an affirmation that they had my back. My dad lived in Stoneham, Mass, and that phone number there is 438. And I started seeing license plates with 438 on them always. And that happened when he died too. So I was like, okay, Dad, like you're with me. And so I started seeing these signs and synchronicities, but a part of me was like, oh my gosh, like I can't talk to anybody about this. People are going to think I'm crazy, yeah. Right? But I met up with a friend who we desperately needed to reconnect. It was one of those that I had been too busy and we had let the friendship fizzle, but I really needed somebody to talk to about losing my job and just feeling that human connection. So I asked her if she'd meet up with me. She said yes, which was huge in and of itself. And I started talking to her, just taking a chance and just pouring everything out about losing the job, about these signs and synchronicities. And the next day she calls me and she says, Danielle, she says, I just saw a license plate with the word Ant-Man on it. And the van pulled right up in front of me. And Ant-Man is the nickname she gives her son, Anthony. So because I opened up to her,
that's awesome.
I was able to have her start seeing some signs. So that's just one of many beautiful moments during the dark night where I felt like I kept getting thanked for being vulnerable and for speaking my truth, right? And one thing that really kept me going during my dark night is remembering that I'm here to help people. And another just quick example I can give, and this is important because it doesn't need to be big, right. The bright lights in our daily life are sometimes more extraordinary than something big happening. There was when I was feeling really down one day, down on myself for not being able to make it in the job, right? For not identity. And a career coaching client I hadn't worked with in like 2 years reached out and sent me this beautiful note saying, you've been on my mind. I have this big career leap I want to take. I need your help with negotiating. And it reminded me who I was. right? It was like, you know what? Yes, I'm here to help. And then long story short there, I was able to give her power. She's making a boatload of money.
That girl.
Exactly. And it's just, yeah, so there was so many little pieces along the way, but then there were some big ones. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Charlie, my yellow lab.
Oh, for sure. Let's talk about Charlie.
Okay,
Yeah,
or should
let's
we
get
just go to
there.
Charlie?
Go for it. Yep.
Okay. So, so Charlie, okay, where do I begin this one? It's so hard figuring out where to start a story because everything.
I know.
But I'll start with my dad again. So my dad, baby boomer, Irish Catholic, just a scary man, a scary scowl, just a scary way about him. And of the many things he taught me growing up, it was that dogs are bad and they can't be trusted, and so that's how I grew up, and even through my 20s, if I saw a dog on the street, I'd intentionally cross the street to avoid a dog. I wanted nothing to do with them, right? Well, my husband, he's got a very small bucket list. He's such a simple, beautiful man, and he hasn't wanted much out of life for me. But the one thing he's always wanted is a dog. He's never had a dog as an adult. He had dogs growing up as a kid. And me, you know, before the Dark Knight, we don't have the money, we don't have the time, I don't like dogs, right? This very, you know, black and white song over and over again. But before my Dark Knight, I did start opening up a little bit to the possibility that one day we might, because I knew it was important to him, but never took it seriously. And if we were going to get a dog, it would be something small and easy to take care of, and yada, yada, yada. So fast forward, I lose my job. 5 days after I lose my job, I'm still lethargic, not thinking right, not feeling right. Like I have no energy for ego. My husband runs in and he says, "We just got a text from our friend. She says there's a dog, and they're going to get rid of him, and he's going to go back to where he was, and that's not a good situation. And she thinks we'd be perfect for him. Do you want to look at the dog?" Now, because I was so weak at the time, I didn't say no. I like murmured like a okay, because I didn't have that grr in me. And so reluctantly we went to go look at Charlie, the yellow lab. My son instantly fell in love with him, just petting him and kissing on him. And I was wary, but I was aware of the love. And I can't explain it, but I said yes when he asked me if we could take Charlie home. And it so wasn't me. It was almost like I was outside of myself, because I realized what I was doing was so not me. But I was just so beautifully weak. And I'm going to say that again, beautifully weak. So again,
there's just writing something like that down. So I want to talk about that, but keep going.
I was beautifully weak. And I said yes. I mean, and then the rest is history. You should have seen me like that first night. I'm like, he's not sleeping with us. Here's the crate. I think that lasted like a day.
Please.
You know, and I'm just a softie. Charlie's my everything. He not to sound cliche, he saved my life. I had to get up and walk him, and I needed that. I don't know during my Dark Knight that I would have had that strength, but I was out in the woods at least twice a day, and I needed that connection to nature. I needed that connection to unconditional love. And he didn't care that I didn't have a job. And he didn't care that the relationships in my life were broken, because the me and him weren't broken. And so he gave me a lot of levity and laughter and just absolute beautifulness.
Well, we've talked about this before, right, Jerry? I mean, because this comes up as animal communicators a lot, that animals come into us, not randomly. They come in to work with us in particular. So Charlie was just waiting for the perfect time. Let your guard down, because he was coming no matter what. And, you know, obviously he came for your whole family, but definitely came
Definitely
for you.
But here's the other thing, that beautifully weak piece that you said, I love that, because, okay, we as humans, we're looking at ourselves like, okay, I was my best when I was in this job and I was really good at it and da 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 da, and I was like in charge and empowered, you know what I mean? I was at my best there. When in actuality, couldn't we think of it as you were at your best when you were too weak for ego to come in and take control of whatever. So you were just in this position of God, Spirit, Universe, as I always say to Ginger, Jesus take the wheel
Yeah.
kind of thing, where we as humans feel that this is the weak part is bad and that ego or part is good. So I love that you said beautifully weak, because if we shift and don't think of it as weak, and instead I was just in this beautiful place of allowing an openness and letting God, Spirit, Universe give me what I need, point me in the right direction. I mean, that gave me goosebumps when you said that,
Right.
beautifully weak, because you were like, whatever's supposed to happen is supposed to happen here, but from a place that I couldn't take control. But like, to me, that's God, Spirit, Universe saying, yes, she can't take control. We've got her. You know what
That's
I
right.
mean? Yeah. And as humans, we always go to that place. That is amazing. That
Yeah.
between that and like what Ginger just said about like animals are like, no surprise whatsoever that you're lying in bed all curled up in the fetal position and your husband comes running in, hey, dog. You know what I mean?
Right.
God,
It's perfect. It's
it's
perfect.
perfect. It's perfect. God, this is amazing. This is so cool. So, what do you do for people? Obviously, so what we had said at the beginning is you, God bless you, went through and did this thing on your own and were able to stick with it and didn't run away or whatever. So now you give to people, you help them so they don't have to do it alone, basically.
Yeah, so one of the big things I'm doing now is just this, making sure people know what a dark night of the soul is.
Yes.
That way they're not me, like desperately searching Google, wondering what they're experiencing. We hear about the triggers, right? Grief, loss of identity, but we don't know what that word is. And if we know what a dark night is, we'll know that there's a community out there, and we'll know where we should be focusing on. I run workshops on a dark night of the soul that goes through the stages that I identified, both on my personal journey and the research I've done to help people go from that darkness to lightness in their own time, in their own way. Most important to me, though, is through the journals. I was journaling sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, and I wrote really detailed notes. For the last few years, I've been writing a memoir. I have been
Mm.
writing a memoir about my experience through the dark night, how my childhood and younger years connected to the dark night, something I couldn't figure out until months deeper, right? On why is this happening? How does this connect? And just talking about my real journey, both my human journey, right? My journey on finding a new job and getting closer to my husband and raising Charlie, but then also this spiritually guided journey. In my memoir, I talk about I tried my hand at energy work and all sorts of different stuff. So my give to the world when the memoir is ready is those journals pieced together, so people have a companion during their dark night. One of the things that I was disappointed with, I didn't want a self-help book.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't ready to go get him, Tiger. But I did want a companion. I wanted to hear a real story about the dark night, and not many exist. And so I hope my memoir gives people some perspective and some companionship. And I do take one-on-one clients as well. So clients can reach out to me if they want some intuitive guidance, or to talk about their dark experience. One of the many gifts that the dark night has given me is I just feel much more comfortable with the darkness, and a lot of people don't. So I've started working with those who are suffering the loss via someone in their family because of suicide or going through terminal cancer. Whatever it is, I'm a good person for that. I don't shy away
Right.
from the dark, if that makes sense.
The one thing that I love is again, like, okay, so if people know that dark night of the soul, like just the fact that you had mentioned this before, that there's like a community, or there's people that's right there has got to be oh, thank God. There's someone else that has gone through what I'm going through. There's someone else that is like a little bit ahead of me, or a lot ahead of me, whatever, that can say, keep walking, you're not alone. You got this. That right there has got to be relief, because you got to admit, the dark night of the soul, it's pretty like, like, oh my God, that's pretty deep. So I love that thing. I'm going to be a little bit selfish here. The journaling piece. So full disclosure, I'm a writer. I've been a writer since I was like in high school. I've freelance written for 30 years, whatever. I know how important it is to journal. And I can't. It's so hard for me to journal. So that is a big piece of it. It seems like, I mean, it was for you. Is it when you do one-on-one with clients, do you really like, hey guys, start journaling? Is that like
That's a great question. Great question. No, I don't feel like that's the only way. A few things as it relates to your selfish question.
Yes.
Writing
Help me,
prompts.
Kim. Or help me, Danielle. Help me, Danielle. Go ahead.
Writing prompts are an excellent tool to help you. In fact, in my newsletter at drdanielleclark.com, every week I send out a personal story focused on breaking judgment habits, an affirmation, and a writing prompt based off of the story I'm telling that week. So and it's meant for a journal writing prompt to get you to going deeper within yourself. But writing prompts are great, but it might be you're hyper focusing on it right now, and you need to get your creativity somewhere else, so that way you're filled up with creativity when you go to those pages. What I recommend, as long as we have a healthy balance of a release and an in, we're in good shape. So you might not be intuitively called to release using journaling, and that's okay. Just ask yourself, how am I releasing my thoughts and my emotions? Maybe you're talking more these days with the podcast, right? Maybe your release is physical. Maybe you're out there taking walks. So I'd say have a column with all your releases, but then find out what your ins are. When I say ins, what are you taking in for love, right? What are you taking in for creativity? And your ins can be the same, anything, an inspiring podcast, or a book that's helping your soul. And so as long as your release and your ins are about balanced, you're in a good place. And you might be able to identify that maybe one's a little longer than the other, and that'll just show you where you need to focus on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, okay, so I've been writing for years and years and years, and that's work to me. It's not bad work. I love doing it, but it's a work-related thing. So maybe that's why I'm not like sit in front of my journal and la la la, like, because I've been writing all day for somebody else, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I've never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense to me. I wanted to go ahead, Ginger.
I was going to say, I think that comes up. It's come up for me often with intuitive readings for people, and not necessarily because I'll hear that, not necessarily journaling, but the fact of two things is, one, being able to feel whatever it is, to actually feel it and not run away from it, and that it does need to be released. So whether it is in journaling or through meditation, or whatever it is, I think we do have a tendency, if it is too painful, to push back from it, to do, well, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to go have a cup of tea, go for a walk. I'm going to call this person, as opposed to sitting with it and feeling it. And that's what it sounds like you did on that whole journey of 6 to 7 months, is I'm going to feel it as best I can. You said you had a couple things here and there, human nature, but that's the only really way to get through anything, right? So I think that's great. What were you going to say, Jerry? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. There's guys blowing leaves out my window, of course, you know what I mean? So it's like, which is what, nobody can fault you for those bloopers, that you had said that you had in the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about judgment habits? Is that what you called it? Judgment habits?
Sure. Yeah. Judgment habit. So a judgment habit I think we know what judgment is. I'll skip to the habit and then talk about it together. A habit tends to be something that we're not putting much thought into. It just becomes second nature to us, right? I'm sure if I stalked you ladies in the bathroom during your morning routine, I'd see you doing something in a very sequential way without even thinking about it. It's just a habit to brush your teeth after you blow dry your hair, and it's just a habit to put the mascara on after the lipstick, right? And so these habits can be great for our day-to-day life because we're not thinking, we're just doing, right? And so that calms our brain a bit. But what the challenge is, when you have a negative habit such as a judgment habit, it's the habit of either self-judging ourselves, self-criticizing ourselves, putting ourselves down so quickly and so rhythmically that we're not even realizing what we're doing, or doing that with others, right? You know, a beautiful woman walks by and the first thing we do is, oh, she must not be nice, right? Or, oh, her shirt's too tight, right? And not even realizing that we're putting this toxicity into ourselves and into the world. And so a part of my dark night was realizing I had so much built up shame and so many names I had called myself, just names. Slut was a big one I had to work through, based off of my teenage years and my 20s and even some things in my 30s. And just these labels of, and I'd call myself these things, right? And not even just go deep and say, well, why? Or, what's making you think that? Like just flat out saying, you're a slut or you're dumb. That was a big one. You're stupid, right? And so it's these judgment habits where you're not even taking the time to understand what you're doing. You're just going about the day and putting yourself or others down. And so during my dark night, it became evident that I needed to understand why I was labeling myself. I needed to understand if I was labeling myself or if society was labeling me and I was taking their viewpoints and making them mine, and really sort it out. And I had to work hard on not judging myself and breaking these judgment patterns and not calling myself bad or not calling myself stupid or slut or whatever that word that was coming up.
Those, yeah, see, this is hitting really close to home, the judgment habits that I say about myself. I'm very critical on myself. So are there any tips of how, like how, what do is it just like, we've talked a lot of like just the fact that just the awareness of it, that, oh my God, I'm really doing that, or I'm doing that way more often than I think I'm doing that. Sometimes just the awareness of it is enough to kind of break it. But are there any other little tips or tricks around that?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, awareness is key. Uh, Realizing you're not as unique as you think, because we tend to target ourselves, right, and say, you should have been perfect, you should have done that better, or whatever we're doing, and we forget that we're in this whole big universe with people just like us. And I know that gives me comfort, because when I attack myself, I feel like I'm the only one in the world that makes a typo. I'm the only one in the world
right.
that drank too much, right? Like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's not true. So that can help. And how do you remember that? Well, you need to have honest conversations with people, just like we're having today.
Mm-hmm.
Reading is very powerful. I'm big into memoirs, obviously, but reading about other people's lived experiences can help, because you're reminded of the human connection, that we're not as different. And what I always tell people, for another quick thing to do when you're being hard on yourself, is if it's a mistake or a perceived mistake. I don't even believe mistakes are real. It's all perceived. But ask what your intention was. Because I would believe that even if you effed something up really, really bad, if you asked yourself what your intention was, more times than not, it was with good intentions, right? Maybe you just went in as a bull in a china shop, because you were up on caffeine, or you were stressed about your knees. Like there's usually a reason, or because you were broken and you were hurt, right? So ask what your intention was. And that's also a nice way to help ground yourself, right? And realize that that's okay if you made a mistake, or weren't the best version of yourself. So I hope that helps to give a few.
It does. I think one of the things that I'm kind of been a little bit aware of lately is trying to, when I'm aware of it, I try to say to myself, would you ever look at anybody else that way? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like if I say, oh my God, look how crappy my hair looks, I can't deal with it, it's out of control and there's nothing I can do with it. Would I ever look at somebody else and say, oh my God, her hair looks like, I'm just not that kind of person. I just wouldn't do that to anybody else. So why am I doing it to me?
I think that negative self-talk is so huge, and I don't know that people recognize they're even doing it. There's a whole conversation that you have with yourself that you're not always connected to. I did a guided meditation in yoga many years ago, and I don't remember what the guided meditation was, but whatever it was led me to understand that I talked terribly to myself. I was really mean, and I don't think I'm a mean person. So I did the same thing, Jerry. I would say to myself when I would feel that, because I was more aware of it, to say, would I ever say that to somebody else? No, never. I would never have a judgment. And it did help, but
yeah. And it's that self-deprecating thing too. Like if somebody will come up and say, I'm using the hair as an example, but oh my God, your hair looks so cute. I'd be like, oh God, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, why can't you just, thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that stuff, especially in women, no offense to men or whatever, but I think we're harder on ourselves. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's wrong of me to say, but we really do get down on ourselves. There's all those, sayings that you should, or, whatever, self-help books, you should put all over your mirror. I love you. You're beautiful. You're like, whatever, I haven't gone that far, but I like what you said. Yeah. Just, I guess the awareness of it and the, is, cause that is a big thing.
Well, I love the intent, looking at your intent, because I think that says everything. I mean, that changes the perception, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I didn't intentionally, yeah. I mean, God, you could go deep, couldn't you? I mean, so how much of your, like in the dark night, was a lot of that coming up? Like a lot of the self-judgment, the judgment habits coming up for you? Like you were realizing, like you said, you were calling yourself all these names. And did you get to the point of, I got to stop, I got to let that, like, did something come up when you're journaling or doing whatever that's like, that's not true? Like,
yes, quite a few things. I think it was this self love and understanding and figuring out my intention, right? And so I had a very promiscuous background, if you will, and that came up. I harbored lots of shame for giving my body in ways that didn't serve me. And I was quick to use the labels slut, for an example. And through this journey of getting to know myself rather than just name call, I connected pieces, and I was able to understand my story with love. And it's not about making excuses for any of my behavior or ways, but it's coming from a place of forgiveness. So my short story is, my dad was an alcoholic, my mom was mentally unwell, and I wasn't cared for the way I should have been as a child. I was neglected, and there was a lot there. And so I can now look at some of the things I've done or the way I've acted and be like, oh,
yeah. So in other words, I wasn't a bad person. I was looking for, human connection or love or approval or whatever that I wasn't getting. So now you're not calling yourself that bad name. You're understanding where it came from, and you can forgive yourself. And for those that are listening, I'm doing air quotes here, because you don't have to forgive yourself. You have to love yourself or look at it in a different way.
Exactly.
Like now I understand where that came from. So I'm not looking at it from, this is bad. I'm looking at it from a place of understanding.
And saying that makes sense.
It makes
That makes absolute sense that that would
absolutely.
happen.
It makes absolute sense. So
And having hard conversations with others was a big one for me too, to finally get those self-judgment patterns out there. There was a few difficult conversations my husband and I had, and I had one perception of some things that had happened in our marriage, but I had never come out and talked about the shame or the hard feelings it was giving me. And what was interesting, when I finally had these hard conversations with him and told him my side of the story, if you will, his was completely different. And he says, Danielle, no, you didn't make that decision because you were forceful. We made that together. Why are you holding shame about that? Like he saw it completely different. So here I am, just holding a lot of that judgment and making myself a person I wasn't in some stories, a perceived bully in some stories. And then when I finally opened up to my husband, he's like, no, Danielle, that's not how it went. Like, we were in it together. Like, it's all good.
that is
So I think
so
that's important
huge.
too.
That is so huge, because I'm that kind of person too. I have some stuff that, we all have baggage and everything. And there's a thing of like, I'm always on guard. I'm always on guard because somebody's going to do something. Somebody's going to mess with me. Somebody's going to hurt me. Every friend, every guy's going to cheat on me. Every friend's going to, hurt me. So it's almost like I create these stories in my head of how this is going to go down based on this conversation. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I'll have a conversation with somebody, or something will happen with somebody. It's exactly what you're talking about. And this is the way I perceive them to be thinking about this. But then we go and have a conversation, or we get together later, and it's like all good. And they're like, what? No, that's not where I went. Here, have a beer. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm thinking, my God, but I understand that I'm doing it because I'm putting my walls up, and I'm preparing myself for the fight. I'm preparing because I have to constantly defend myself in my mind. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that perception thing is huge. It's kind of like, and I'm not going to open a can of worms here, but it's kind of like, Ginger and I have been talking about this, social media. You type something, somebody looks at it and takes it, like somebody looks at this one sentence or this one funny meme or something and goes bam, 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 and creates this thing. And you're like, what? It was funny. Do you know, like, it was like, you didn't mean to go there. And it's not just social media. It's like behind, I think Ginger and I have talked about this a lot of times too, behind an email, behind a text. If you're not talking to somebody and hear their inflection, see their body language or something like that, you can create anything the way you perceive this sentence. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and all those things, Jerry, that you say, email, texting,
Yes.
social media, that's become our thing.
Yes.
And it distances us from other people, because
Yeah.
I can't hear what's in your voice. I can't hear what you're, and I mean, because we're all intuitive, I can hear that when we're speaking. I can't always in an email. So it is best, if you have any kind of upset or conflict or question, is to speak directly, even though sometimes it's really hard. You don't want to go there.
It's super hard. And you really have to be very, like, for me, it can be hard because what I just said, I immediately, okay, I'm braced for this. I'm braced for this. If he says this, I'm going to say this. If she says it, I'm going to say, this is how, like, I'm like, you know what I mean? Because of what's come up in the past. Clearly, I have to get rid of this stuff. That's still just say it. I'm working on it, I swear. But I realize, and I haven't done the whole dark night thing like you have, but maybe mine's like a lighter night that's been going on for longer. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm doing the little bit of work. Like, you did the work, like, bam, you did the work. Like, I've been slowly but surely. And so I see these things coming up and I'm like, okay, stop doing that. And I need to just be very open and very, hey, this is what's going on with me, but it's hard. And I do have to let those walls down, but I know it's something, it's something I have to work on. It's just continually trying to work on it. But I love what you just said about that perception.
Yeah, and you have to be vulnerable, and that's the hardest of all.
Yes.
Right.
Especially if one of the things that comes up for you is being attacked when you're vulnerable.
Right.
be vulnerable.
Okay,
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, really, really super hard. But God, so fascinating. When is the memoir going to be done?
yeah.
Because I need it now. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. I'm finishing up this draft and then it goes to my editor, hoping it will be on shelves within the next 2 years, but realistically, probably 3. However, as you ladies do, follow me on social media. Anybody out there, it's at Dr. Danielle Clark. You'll hear my writing progress. You'll get information about A Dark Night and continue to keep the conversation going, because you're right, this is important stuff.
Yeah. And did you say you do have a newsletter? Did you say a
I
newsletter?
do.
Okay.
I do. I encourage everybody to sign up for it. It's once a week. You're not going to get spammed. It's a beautiful personal story from me every week. There's usually some sort of a learning lesson in there about breaking judgment habits. And then you'll get notified of any events that I'm offering. In addition, I always offer an affirmation, which is also a great way to help that to give yourself some positivity and affirmation of who you are, and then a writing prompt. So for those who do want to journal, or even if you don't, even if you just want to think about it, I'll always add in a way that you can take the content a little bit further if you want to do the hard work that week.
Yeah. So is that something that everybody can find on your website?
Yes, if
Yeah.
they go to drdanielleclark.com, and Clark does not have an E at the end, so it's Danielle, C-L-A-R-K, it's drdanielleclark.com. Right on the front page, you'll see my smiling face. You'll have a way that you can sign up, and if you hang out on the website for a few, you'll even get a pop-up to invite you to join the newsletter.
Yeah, and you'll be on our guest page on our website, thepsychicwives.com. So everybody, if you missed that, don't worry about it. It'll be up on our guest page, so you can click directly from there.
Beautiful.
So, man,
I know.
been super cool. I'm just kind of in, not to be like all like stalkerish, but I'm kind of in awe of you again, just because of that whole, you did it yourself. You know what I mean? And are continuing to be of service to others who may not be, and this is not a judgment, but may not be as strong to be able to do it, and push, I don't want to say push through, but own it and allow it and work with it, and somehow in the middle be able to shift and see this as a good thing.
Well, to even recognize it, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't know that people would recognize, there's usually a catalyst, right? To that, to recognize that it's going to take you on a journey. And if you can do what you had mentioned, or what we've been talking about, is recognize it, try to work it through, get support around it,
Yeah.
and see the light for where it is. Follow that intuitive piece of yourself to work it through. On the other side of that, however long it takes, and we're not talking years generally, right?
For some, I've heard it takes years. However, it's not necessarily that intense period for years.
Well, maybe that's what we're talking about with me. It's not that intense period, but I'm working on all this stuff for years. Maybe,
Right.
like I said, I'm a gray night, not a dark night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I'm lazy, or I'm fighting it too much, or something like that, and then it's the other thing is, like, it could have gone, like, maybe what it is, or would you guys agree with this, or what do you guys think of this, is like, okay, so, Danielle, you were called to this, you were pulled in this, direction. There are some people that would have maybe like, okay, lost my job, must find new job, and would have just immediately gone into resume production and da 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 da, and like autopilot, so wouldn't even be aware of the pull. You know what I mean? I'm sure we've all done that before. I know I can probably say that before I moved into this stage of my life got to leave this job, got to find another, or something like that. So again, another reason why I'm glad we're putting this out there. So maybe somebody listens to this and realizes, oh, let me not start freaking out and get the resumes, or let me not start like, how do, because this is what we do as humans. How do I fix this?
Right.
Let me wrestle this to the ground and fix it and get back to my regular life the way I know it, as opposed to what we were saying before, that beautiful weakness.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Oh, I love this. Oh my
I
God.
know.
And that's why this is so important, because 2020 it brought a lot of people a dark night. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
now they have the name for it. And although it sparked it, many people are still through it, that the world that they know, whether a loss of a loved one or the loss of a job or just the loss of travel, it doesn't have to be big, guys. I mean, it's almost comical. If on paper, if you saw my life, like by 15, I knew emotional abuse, I knew sexual abuse, lost my dad in my 20s, like it's all this like crazy stuff, and it was the job loss.
Right.
That's the dark night, right? It was the job loss. So it could
Yes.
be, talking about judgment, and I think this is a great piece for everyone to just remember, is don't judge what sparked your dark night, right? Maybe it's big, maybe it's small, maybe it's gray, Jerry. Like wherever you are, don't judge it. That's the first step, is don't judge. Just take it as it is, because that's going to keep yourself open. If you start saying, well, I should be stronger, or this shouldn't be happening, and you're right, escapism. I had to fight that. My first call was, okay, how am I going to fix that, right? Like, how am I going to get a new job? How am I going to prove to the world that I'm still in the game? But my intuition was stronger, and that beautiful weakness was there for me. And I realized I couldn't get back out there. And I was fortunate. I had abundance in my life where I didn't need, the job loss had nothing to do with me worrying about my mortgage, or, worrying about taking care of my family. Those foundational needs were covered. So a great, but yes, 2020 brought a lot of change for a lot of people, whether it's the isolation that's brought you to a dark night. Maybe you don't even realize why you're in that dark night yet. Don't judge it. No, you're not alone. And there's ways to work with it. One of my favorite quotes is, it's the cracks in our heart that let the light shine in.
So good. And so good what you said about, it could be these little things. We, whatever happens, like, okay, all this stuff happened to you, but it was the loss of the job, so it's like these little things we have to trust. We have to have faith that God, Spirit, and universe knows what it's doing and is giving it to us in the way we need it. Like if it was the death of your father, maybe you weren't ready for it then. Do you know what I mean? If it was, trauma or whatever, you weren't ready for it then. You couldn't have done it the way you did it. We have to trust. It's that Jesus take the wheel thing. God, Spirit, universe, take the wheel. That's what I always say. God, Spirit, universe, take the wheel, or whatever that caused you. So just, it could be this stupid little thing that throws you over the edge, and you're like, what the hell?
I know. Divine timing, whenever it comes.
Divine timing. Awesome.
Oh, this has been great, Danielle. Thank you so much. I think that, as you mentioned, 2020 was probably a catalyst year for many more people to go through whatever it is that they're going through. And I hope that this is really helpful to them, and they'd be able to reach out to you and find the support and information to be able to get through.
Yeah, I hope that just one person, even if one person looks at this and says, oh,
yeah.
Oh,
thank God.
What, oh, thank God I'm not alone. Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Just perfect. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And as Jerry mentioned, Dr. Danielle Clark's information will be up on the Psychic Wives website. So look for that under the guest information. And thank you to Danielle for coming with us today. We really enjoyed the conversation. Great info. And thank you to all the listeners. As usual, to find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. At the Psychic Wives is our Facebook page, and thepsychicwives.com is our website. So thank you for listening, and we will be back with you again next week.
Thanks all. Thanks, Danielle.
Bye.
Thank you.